Hi, today's topic I'd like to discuss today is what pre-strike planning should actually include for companies and organizations facing labor disputes and picket line environments. I'm Rob Reeleater. I'm president and founder of Western Protection Alliance here in Vancouver, and I wanted to address what pre-strike planning should actually include, and there's some valuable points in that. Firstly is contingency planning, and contingency planning organizations need to do specifically for a potential strike or a lockout. So that involves security. What if you have multiple sites, one site, security in your whole chain you need to plan for, and that's super important. The transportation, so getting product and people in and out of picket lines safely, that's your goal, and you need to plan for that. So planning is fairly consuming when we look at larger sites, larger workforces, and also logistically spread out. So you need to certainly include that as part of your contingency planning. And then lastly is logistics. Is your supply chain spread out? Are your customers located close or far away or outside the country? Are they domestic, foreign? All those form your logistics, and your supply chain needs to be educated as well as informed and part of that contingency plan. So it really involves some specific planning for your organization facing a potential strike to achieve your goal, and that's super important. Number two is personnel readiness. And so what do I mean by personnel readiness? You're not typically hiring personnel to cross picket lines every day. You're building widgets, you're doing whatever at your business that you're experts in. So picket line crossings, people aren't familiar typically with what to do with picket line crossings. So the personnel readiness really forms the pre-strike planning. So getting in and out of picket lines safely is going to be really important to staff that, again, weren't hired to do that. So if they're driving their own cars, are you picking up the insurance deductible? What happens when pickets start forming around the vehicle? Are they told to use the bathroom before they get to the picket line because they might be there for a few minutes? All those are quite important when you're dealing with staff crossing picket lines. The second part of personnel readiness is their duties. What do they need to do on a regular basis? Are you having them come into work during a strike or a lockout every day? Say they work Monday to Friday. Are you still having them come to work? Can they work remotely? What are their job? Has their job changed? And then there's some ripple effect with potential legal if their job's changing and it's long term. But are they taking on other duties and kind of pitching in to do that? And are they trained to do that? And then are they comfortable doing that? And I guess most importantly, are they competent to do it? So that's important. And then another part of the personnel readiness is the personnel safety and their families. So let's say it's a heated picket line environment, small town or big city, doesn't really matter. There's a potential threat to them and their families, particularly if they're in the bargaining committee negotiating a contract on behalf of the company. So those can be potential targets, and those people need to have a peace of mind and a safety to go about their lives and to continue obviously operating the business. It's a high stress environment. They need to be confident that their themselves and their families are taken care of and safety provided. Sometimes executive protection is required, or at least part of that planning process. Taking kids to school on a daily basis, doing random drive-bys to provide security, executive protection, or driving them to and from their place of business. It all depends on the risk assessment, which is next. So the risk assessment forms really the third part of the pre-strike planning process. And so risk assessments are done at a variety of levels, and the number one is physical. So you have to do physical risk assessments to what you're facing in a labor dispute. Your sites, your supply chain, your customers, all those areas where you're shipping product to, your mustering station, etc. So that's really important. The supply chain. Have you educated the supply chain, and what's the risk involved with your supply chain breaking down and not fulfilling your mandate for you to operate or survive during a labor dispute? So that's really important. I've seen multiple things happen with supply chains that ruined companies in labor disputes. A lot of times lack of communication and a lack of planning and risk assessment and where that fits. So that's super important. And then lastly, with pre-strike planning is your coordination planning. How are you stepping your fulfillment of all these tasks? And who's coordinating it? Hopefully not by committee. Committees don't really work in strike environments. You need a decision maker, preferably somebody from the C-suite, vice vice president of operations or chief operating officer, something with thorough knowledge of the operating environment for the company or organization, and also a person with a mandate that can get things done. So that's important. Committees won't work. The contingency planning process, that's fine. But when it comes to the actual dispute, it's going to fail by committee. So that's really important. So that's why I wanted to talk about what pre-strike planning should actually include: contingency planning, personnel readiness, risk assessments, and then the coordination planning. And if you wanted any additional information, feel free to reach out to me at releader@westernalliance.ca, or my telephone number is 604-880-0645. Thank you.